The night before the raid, Eirik Halvorsen stood at the edge of the camp, staring into the darkness beyond the firelight while the rest of his clan prepared for battle. Laughter echoed behind him, steel clashed softly as weapons were sharpened, and voices carried the confidence of men who believed they would return victorious by sunrise. But Eirik wasn't listening, because hours earlier, something had shifted inside him in a way he couldn't explain. Not fear, not weakness, but something quieter. A thought that refused to leave. And that thought would lead him to make a decision that would destroy everything he had spent his life protecting. Not in battle, not in chaos, but in silence, long before the first sword was ever raised. Because sometimes, the most dangerous moment in a man's life doesn't happen in front of others. It happens alone, when no one is watching, and the only thing guiding him is the thought he chooses to believe. Before we go further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. At first, there was nothing unusual about Eirik Halvorsen, and that was exactly what made everything that followed so difficult for people to understand. He had been raised the same way every man in his clan had been raised, taught from childhood that loyalty was not something you questioned, but something you lived by without hesitation. Strength, discipline, and honor were not ideas to him. They were rules. He trained harder than most, fought without hesitation, and stood at the front when others stepped back.
Stay close.
Over time, that consistency became something people relied on. His brothers trusted him, his elders respected him, and his father believed that one day Eirik would lead them. From the outside, his life followed a clear path, one built on values that never changed. But what no one noticed was that beneath that steady exterior, something else had started forming quietly, not as an action, not as a decision, but as a series of thoughts that felt too small to matter at first. Those thoughts didn't arrive all at once. They came gradually, almost unnoticed, slipping into moments when Eirik was alone or when the noise of the world around him faded just enough for his mind to wander. Why am I always the one who sacrifices? Why does loyalty always demand more from me than from anyone else? I've done everything the right way, so why does it feel like I'm the one carrying the weight? He never spoke those thoughts out loud, and more importantly, he didn't challenge them. They didn't feel dangerous. They felt honest. And because they felt honest, they stayed. Over time, those thoughts began shaping the way he saw everything around him. Small moments started to feel different. Decisions that once felt simple began to carry weight. And without realizing it, Eirik wasn't just following the rules anymore. He was starting to question them. The raid they were preparing for was not just another battle. It was everything. Winter was approaching, and the success of that raid would determine whether the clan survived the coming months. Every man knew what was at stake, and every man believed they were ready. But Eirik had seen something the others hadn't. Days earlier, while scouting ahead, he had come across signs that didn't match what they expected. More movement, more preparation, more resistance than they had planned for. The enemy wasn't unprepared. They were waiting. And for the first time in his life, Eirik felt something unfamiliar. Not fear of battle, but doubt in the outcome. That doubt stayed with him, growing stronger as the day of the raid approached, until it became impossible to ignore. That night, as the rest of the clan celebrated around the fire, speaking of victory and sharpening their blades with confidence, Eirik sat quietly, watching, listening, thinking. Because now the question in his mind wasn't about loyalty. It was about survival. What if this wasn't a battle they could win? What if loyalty, the very thing he had built his life around, was leading them directly into defeat? And that was the moment the thought appeared. Clear, simple, and impossible to ignore. You don't have to go down with them. Eirik didn't react at first. He didn't move or speak. But the thought stayed. It returned again, quieter but stronger. You could survive this. You could choose something different. At first, he resisted it. That's not who I am. That's not what I do. But the thought didn't argue. It adapted. It shifted into something easier to accept. This isn't betrayal. This is survival. And that was the moment everything changed. Because the thought no longer felt wrong. It felt reasonable. It felt justified. Eirik stood up and walked away from the fire, leaving the voices and the laughter behind him as he stepped into the darkness beyond the camp. No one followed him. No one questioned him, because no one had any reason to. And in that silence, with nothing but his own thoughts guiding him, he made a decision. Not rushed, Not emotional. Quiet. Deliberate. By the time the sun rose, he had already chosen a path he could never return from. The raid began like every other. The clan moved forward together, shields raised, weapons ready, voices steady with the confidence of men who trusted one another completely. But something was different. Something no one noticed until it was too late. The enemy was ready. More ready than they should have been. Attacks came faster, more precise, as if every move had been anticipated. Confusion spread first, then panic. Lines broke. Orders were lost in the chaos. And slowly, the realization began to form among the men still standing. This wasn't chance. This wasn't bad luck. Someone had told them. By the time the truth became clear, the damage had already been done. Eirik Halvorsen had given the enemy everything they needed. The plan, the timing, the weaknesses. And in return, he got exactly what he believed he wanted. Survival. But what Eirik didn't understand was this. Survival without loyalty comes at a cost far greater than death. Because when the battle ended and the dust settled, Eirik was still alive. But he was no longer one of them. Not part of the clan. Not part of anything. He had saved his life, but he had lost everything that gave that life meaning. In the world Eirik came from, betrayal didn't fade with time. It didn't get forgotten. It became part of who you were. A man who broke that code didn't just lose his place among his people. He lost his name. And the life Eirik thought he was protecting disappeared the moment he decided the thought in his mind was acceptable. Not when the battle ended. Not when his clan fell. But in that quiet moment the night before, when he chose to believe something that felt right, even though it changed everything. Most people believe they would never do something like that. That they would recognize the line before crossing it. But the truth is, moments like that rarely feel clear when you're inside them. They feel quiet, reasonable, justified. And by the time you understand what they really are, the decision has already been made. So the question isn't whether Eirik Halvorsen survived. The real question is this. If you were standing in his place, knowing what was coming, and no one would ever know what you chose, would you stay loyal, or would you choose yourself? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more psychological stories about power, loyalty, and the hidden decisions that shape people's lives, subscribe to Beneath the Surface Stories. Because the next story might be even more disturbing.